It is Friday, April 1st. Let's talk PlayStation. Hello everyone, welcome back. It was definitely an interesting week when it came to PlayStation news, no doubt, so we'll have a lot to go over. And first, I just want to mention real quick, I am aware of the spam comments down below where they're trying to pose as me and scam me out of something, but just I want to put it out there. Not me. I will only ever contact giveaway winners on Twitter or email, which the email would be the same email listed on this channel under the About Me section for the business email. So just keep that in mind. If you spot those comments, go ahead and report them. I've been blocking them for the past 2-3 weeks. So kind of a pain, but just keep that in mind. Anyway, let's start with our PS Plus reminder. Grab the March games before they go away. April 5th, it's going to change over to Hood, Outlaws and Legends for PS4 and PS5, and then Slay the Spire for PS4, and also SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, also for PS4 as well. Now, I'm sure there's plenty of complaints to go around here, but I will say I'm thrilled with SpongeBob, which I bought that physical recently. I'm not sure if I still have it sealed. I guess it will stay sealed if that is the case, but I miss cartoony, platformy games, and so yeah, I think that's actually I'm happy to see that. I'll download that, and maybe I'll pop in sooner rather than later because again I had the disc, but yeah, that one I consider a W in a weird way. Anyway, moving on to our first news story, we have patch 1.09 for Horizon Forbidden West, and this one is the same thing, where a lot of fixes to quests in the game, but now the wording for the shimmering issue, which is still considered a known issue, has changed slightly. So now it says that the team is making adjustments to the game's content with the goal to reduce the visual shimmering issue. So hopefully they've figured out something where it actually is getting better over time, because again, we've seen a new patch almost every single week for the game, which is good, and the communication is really the best part. So yeah, there's a lot of little bugs you can run into, but it's always appreciated when we have direct communication about here's all the things we know about, here's all the things we're working towards, and here's all the things that were fixed in this last patch, and even more general changelog items. They'll expand upon that and explain exactly what they did with those particular changes. Always nice to see. Next up, we have a server shutdown notice for the game Everybody's Golf on PS4. After September 30th, you will not be able to play this game online anymore, which is really disappointing because, well, not only do I love this franchise, it's so fun, but also this game has 2 or 3 online trophies. So if you're playing it right now, or if you're on and off trying to get the platinum, you might want to make sure you get that knocked out. I'm not sure how time consuming the online trophies are, but just something where you want to be mindful of that. And it's also disappointing because this is one of the longest running PlayStation IP ever, actually, and I love it, but I feel like we're not going to see this IP in particular for quite a long time, which is really disappointing because, again, it's more casual, it's easy to play, it's fun. I don't know. I mean, Clap Hands right now has moved on to mobile stuff. It seems like Sony doesn't really have an interest in doing another one of these, or at least not anytime soon, and that's kind of a bummer. Moving on to Forspoken. Recently, Game Informer had a 9 or 10 minute something clip to share online, which was showcasing mostly uninterrupted gameplay, which is always welcomed, and for Forspoken we've actually gotten a good amount of that already, but this latest build looks much better, I think. Granted, I think there's still a lot of skepticism that is, I think, warranted. A lot of it is just, the world looks to be a bit empty, and when you're engaging with enemies, they still come off as kind of useless or not really doing anything, and they're taking a lot of hits before they go down. But everything else seems compelling, which that's the hard part about watching gameplay clips or trailers. It's just, there's no good way to get a sense of what the moment-to-moment gameplay really feels, and if it can hook you in a way where it's compelling for a 20-30 hour something experience. But the game looks flashy and beautiful. The one interesting thing I found is that they did mention when covering the footage is that there is fall damage in the game, which, it's weird. The environment is so big and so vast, and you're really moving around and jumping so far, so you're actually going to have to always be mindful of making sure that you slow down your approach as you land. But otherwise, it looks better, but I think the criticisms are still there. But I would like to see more, and remember, the game was delayed to October, so it'll be a bit until we see more, but for now at least I think it's looking okay. Now, of course, the big news this past week was the proper reveal and formal announcement of the PlayStation Plus relaunch happening in June, which we were able to cover on Tuesday immediately, so good timing there. But since then, of course, the dust has settled. We're seeing, how most people are feeling about it, and also we can cover up some details that we missed in the Tuesday video, so let's do that now. First, things that we missed and things that we also found out after the fact. The first one being you can't, come June, you will not be able to subscribe to PS Plus directly from a PS3 or Vita. So this is something where you can still utilize a PS Plus subscription on these consoles, but you can't buy it directly on them, which is kind of a unique circumstance that won't apply to many people. But come June, you have to subscribe to PS Plus from, desktop, mobile, PS4, PS5. Then you can say, re-download claimed items. If you did claim them back in the day on PS3 Vita, then you can re-download them, or you can use cloud saves. You can still utilize the membership, which would be at a minimum the first tier, but just bear in mind, come June, you can't subscribe on a PS3 or Vita. The other thing is that the PlayStation Plus collection, so that's actually staying, which I thought for sure they would just kind of roll that in, but looking back, that would have to get rolled into the second tier, which the PS Plus collection is meant to be a benefit for PS5 owners in the first tier. So that's actually staying. And we also found out that Persona 5 will leave the PS Plus collection May 11th, 2022. So a little weird, but at the very least, make sure you claim that. And it's also something where you might want to play Royal before Persona 5, but it's, a benefit that you're entitled to. So if you haven't claimed it, or if you're still, going to get a PS5 later, just make sure you grab Persona 5 before it goes away, so it's always attached to your account. Also, when it comes to PS Vita, right, a lot of people are asking, how come there's no PS Vita support? So, yeah, PS Vita is not in there. It was never a part of the rumors to begin with. Now, hopefully, as time goes on, they add more titles, and perhaps they'll eventually get to PS Vita. That's the thing, right? With the classic games, they announced 340 titles. They didn't say what games or, what the breakdown was across PS1 to PSP, which we already know PS3 is in there. We have PS3 today. They didn't, really say too much beyond that point, right? You would assume over time that, yes, there's going to be more titles added on an ongoing basis, right? Or, at least for the PS4 and PS5 catalog, we will get what we know today, which is for PS Now, we'll have a rotating library of, say, more recent titles on a 3-month, basis. Normally is what we see. They go in, they come out after 3 months, and that's for more recent titles. Some games will be added indefinitely, so that could be long term. We'll also see some, big budget, like higher budget indie games, and also perhaps major third-party releases. Sony might finally start pursuing those as a day-and-date sort of thing, which we've seen them casually do, right? So they did Shadow Warrior 3 recently on PS Now. We've seen, things like Fall Guys launch on PS Plus, so they do it occasionally. I expect all that is going to be the same. It's a matter of how aggressive are they really going to be with these things. And for the classic titles, I would certainly hope that we are going to get more of those on an ongoing basis, and perhaps they'll get to Vita. Although I will admit with Vita, it's in a weird position where, not so much because of the back touchpad and the front touch, and, because they can adjust for swipe gestures. Uncharted wouldn't be a huge problem, except the portion of the game where you need the camera near a light source. That would be kind of a weird thing that they have to skirt around somehow, but it's not necessarily that. It's that there's just not really much for Vita. I mean, the Vita library is fantastic, but after like 2014, a lot of those titles, I mean, they're available everywhere. We're talking, indies that love to support Vita, but they'll also ship on Vita, Switch, PS4. I mean, now they're doing PS5 versions, Xbox, PC. It's, all that stuff's on Steam. Vita didn't have a whole lot of truly unique exclusive experiences. I mean, there's some, but I wouldn't expect the Vita catalog to necessarily need to be on here, but there's certainly a few titles, around launch and shortly after launch where, yeah, I would like to see them on there eventually. Now, when it comes to actual improvements for these classic games, what should we expect? This is something where, again, Sony didn't really say much of anything, but we do have a Famitsu interview with the SIE president and CEO Jim Ryan, where he did say, and I quote here, "More details to come, but I've heard from people who have played with it that it looks great on PlayStation 4 and 5, but it will depend on the title of the game." I think at a minimum, we're expecting something has to be done clearly for, PS1, 2, and PSP titles being played on modern televisions. So clearly something's going to be done there to make sure these games look decent on a modern TV. I think it's really more a question of what are they going to do beyond that, right? And that's where I would temper expectations, and really this is something where prior to this announcement, for the longest time, and it's kind of a trend here on this channel, we're all about setting those expectations. And so for this, I would also caution, the other question a lot of people have been asking is, will the classic games have trophies? I'm going to say no. Here's why. The PS2 Classics program on PlayStation 4 was very short-lived. Over that entire life cycle, we only got 50-something games, and most of them released shortly after the program started in 2016, right? It's not like they did 20, 30 games, and then we saw another 30 or 20 over the next 4 or 5 years. Like, most of them already came out within a short burst, and well, we didn't see much more since then. Shuhei Yoshida was pretty candid about it, where he tried to tell people, like, this is why we're charging money for them, this is why we're not letting you use. He didn't directly say this when it comes to discs, but he more or less indirectly answered, here's why we're not going to let you use the original PS2 disc to pull a download like Microsoft. They argued that when it comes to actually bringing the game back and adding trophies, it was something where they felt that they could charge money for it, and well, that's just their decision. But it seems obvious that they did not care much for that program, or it wasn't very advantageous, which adds more evidence to what we often unfortunately have to say to people, is that I love classic games, a lot of people do, but you have to understand the vast majority of consumers are buying and playing new consoles to play new and updated games. Backwards compatibility or retro games or, emulated titles, most people don't really play them nearly as much as one would think. So it seems like that program was not very successful. That, and a lot of people keep mentioning, oh, what about that new patent that Sony filed for adding trophies to classic games? Yeah, that patent is the one they used for the PS2 program on PS4. Now, I know places like IGN, even IGN overlooked this, where you have to look at the patent history or the related patents to actually see how far back that patent goes. That one is from around 2016, so basically that's the same technology they're using for those PlayStation 2 games, which that patent is meant so you don't have to touch the original game code. You just base it off of certain, save states in that game where if certain conditions are met, then the trophy is rewarded based on how that game handles, I believe, save data. So that's how that works, and it's not an automatic process whatsoever, but that's an old patent. We might have talked about that when it came up like 2-something years ago on LTPS, but if you weren't here or you forgot, that's not a new patent. And also, yes, Sony has a mandate. So since 2009, trophies have been mandated. If you release a game on PlayStation hardware, it has to have trophies. But this is Sony's mandate, so we can't say that that's why they're going to be here. It's Sony's mandate. They can easily remove their own mandate if they want to, in the interest of, getting a library going here for a lot of classic games. So I would guess that they are not going to bother with trophies this time around, and they're just going to ignore their own mandate, which they do occasionally, depending on what the application or small game experience is. Obviously, demos don't have trophies. There's plenty of games that don't have trophies on PlayStation 3 when the PS1 and PS2 Classics program was still ongoing. So my point is, I know this is long-winded, but I'm just trying to explain. I would not expect trophies for these classic games, but I would love to be wrong. The other thing I want to talk about is the overall amount of games being offered. So this is where I mentioned it in the Tuesday video, but that blog post said over 700 games with this new relaunch. Now, I'm starting to second guess what I said in that video, where it's like, well, currently we have 800 something games on PS Now. And if there's 340 additional games, like the blog post said, then in theory we're looking at over 1,100. But the thing is, why would they not say that? So I'm actually a little nervous here, because I think what might possibly be happening is that the service relaunch is, we might actually lose games technically, because we have more right now. And that's, again, another point of how most people, even, places like IGN or whatever, these places don't even really know what PS Now currently is. In theory, we're losing games if it goes to 700 titles. And if we're looking at 340 across PS1 to PS3 streaming, PSP, we might be losing a lot of PlayStation 3 if that is somehow the new catalog of classic titles. I'm not trying to fearmonger here, but I'm just trying to understand why they're wording it the way that they're wording it. So if it's only 340 across all those platforms for classic games, we're getting down to 340, and that's split across all these new platforms now. It's just, there's a big discrepancy that I'm now a little bit weary of. So we'll see how that plays out, but I think it's important to really note that it may very well not be 1,100 titles. There might be license expirations happening once June comes around, but we'll see once more details actually come out. Now, there's also something to be said about the general perception of this service so far, which for the most part it seems it was not good. I mean, panned across the board, which, I mean, yeah, I saw it coming. I even called it out on the show, but like, that's not really a bold prediction. We can keep talking about what it's going to be. No day and date, no PS3 emulation, but it doesn't matter. The comparisons are going to get drawn. Microsoft is willing to loss lead. That's what we talked about on Tuesday. That's why we have Jim Ryan making a statement like, it's going to harm the quality of our first-party titles. That's, obviously a kind of a BS, whatever PR statement, but he's more or less indirectly explaining to people, we want to make money on our services and our games. We want to return a profit. The biggest difference between these two right now is that, Microsoft is willing to loss lead, and that's fine for them. If it wasn't cost prohibitive, I think Sony would be willing to do it, because obviously it's something where many companies across various sectors are doing a subscription-based model. So it's not like they're not looking at it, but right now it seems that it's not viable for them. That, and also I'm very surprised at just how much backlash there was for what I thought was mostly expected. PS3 streaming, no emulation. Now look, I'm actually pleased to see how many people are mad about it, because perhaps that might do something where Sony is obviously seeing all the feedback. But as we've explained so many times on this channel, and we're not going to spend another 10 minutes talking about this, but it's not even close to as simple as people make it out to be. Yes, in theory, it's possible. The thing is, Sony obviously knows PS3 better than anybody. They have all the reference and source material. If anybody can reliably emulate PS3 games, it's them, but it's just far too costly. Microsoft worked on their program back in 2011. They restarted it in 2014. Also, they monetized the program, so each title goes through QA and recert again, and that's why not every game is supported. And they also recently tapped out. Sony would have to have been doing this a long time ago for us to get it now. People also like to bring up our PCS3. I think they're a good example of why they, again, won't do it, because it takes so long, the performance just isn't there. So yes, they can probably do it better than them, or some people are saying just use what they're doing, but it's far more complicated than that. It's a lot more cost for Cell versus what Microsoft was doing, right? It took them so long, but for Cell it's going to be even longer. There's so much working against it for what is kind of a checklist feature that may very well not even remotely close be a return that is worth it for them. It's more of a goodwill thing. I wish they would do it, but I am not expecting it, and I can't even say it's like unreasonable that they're not doing it. But I would love for them to do it eventually. The only argument that really holds water here is that how long are they going to really support PS3 server blades? I don't even know if they're putting new ones into service or if they're using the same ones that originally went into service. That part of Sony is very secretive, so we really don't know too much about that. But it's a good point. Eventually, they have to do something. Will they? I really don't know. But I will say that the criticisms are certainly there, right? But I think this is better than what we have had for a long time. That's why I wanted this consolidation. PS Now, PS Plus, put them together. Do something for classic games that, nips away this narrative that we don't care about our old games. They're doing all those things. I think this is a good starting point, and we have to wait to really draw conclusions once we have not only the library, but see how they add to that library over time. So I think this is a good starting point. It's really about what they do over time, not necessarily what they announce just on Tuesday alone. Next up, it looks like we might have a much better idea of what's going on with at least one of Firesprite's projects, where over on their website, as we've seen before, they openly say what the project is going to be for the most part, and one of those projects was a AAA narrative adventure game with a branching path. And now a new job listing is a bit more descriptive, where it describes it as, it says, and I quote here, We are looking for a narrative director to join our development team for a AAA narrative-driven horror adventure game in Unreal 5. And we also saw recently that Pete Ellis, a former designer at Naughty Dog, will be the associate game director on this project. So in total, we've actually got a lot going on for Firesprite, which is Horizon Call of the Mountain. Also a multiplayer project that also says Unreal 5 now, so that was updated, and we assume that's Twisted Metal. Then the AAA branching narrative, which I'm going to put two and two together, that's probably the new horror game, so they're not doing that many things. But there's that, also an action shooter game, and then also the mobile team that they're building, which I totally forgot they actually, they did Run Sackboy Run a long time ago, close to around when Vita came out, and also for iOS, Android, so that's actually not their... This new mobile team is not their first mobile project, but I guess technically it's one where they're now under PlayStation Studios officially. But either way, Firesprite is big, and this is actually an exciting prospect because it's been a long time since we've had a proper AAA first-party horror game from Sony. So that will be interesting to see. And actually, just overall, it'll be interesting to see Firesprite really put out all these projects now that they have the financial backing from Sony. It's weird. We have so many studios to look at now when it comes to following PlayStation Studios, and just Firesprite alone has so much coming out. But anyway, moving on to our next news story, it seems like there's more major PlayStation news coming out very soon, or at least that's what we're expecting, based on what we saw from this past week, where we had Kind of Funny's Greg Miller mention on, Monday, where he explained that he's heard 3 big rumors, and if even one of them are true, he wants to delay his podcast so he can talk about it, which would make sense, but people were then wondering, okay, what's the other 2 rumors? Then he had to, explain, well, hold on a second, let's, temper expectations. And then yesterday he had on Kind of Funny Games Daily, he had himself and also Games beat reporter Jeff Grubb, where he talked about this on his show for Giant Bomb. They had a candid conversation about, what these rumors actually are. One of them was, in fact, the PS Plus thing, kind of obvious. The other one, they explained, is some sort of PS VR2 thing, which, that's something I was expecting anyway prior to GDC, but we're close enough, so that's got to be soon. And then the third one is some sort of very big acquisition where they're talking about how they've heard it. Greg said he's heard from a pool of people. Jeff Grubb explains that it's very hard to pin down rumors, specifically with Sony, where they take it very seriously, and that does jive with what we've seen for a while now, and you have to really remember that when you're, say, on Twitter, seeing people act like they know things and teasing things when, trust me, they don't know anything. Sony takes leaks very seriously, and that's why we don't really often see a whole lot of them come. Not a whole lot leaks out of Sony, but I digress. There's that, and at least for acquisition talks, this is also something where we've seen time and time again, most people don't ever actually find out what's going on until day of, maybe a few hours before. That's about the earliest when, actual leaks come out for a major acquisition. So even in a situation like this, I'd still be a bit weary, but they do explain that it's, at best, secondhand information, because not many people would know what's going on with, negotiations and acquisition talk. But it seems like something is coming, and, well, that's not surprising either. I think we're all expecting another acquisition at some point, but it's really more a matter of, what is it going to be? And if it is big, that's where it's really like, okay, is Sony finally going to get to that point where they're picking up a full-blown publisher? And that's going to really change the dialogue of how Sony's been doing this. And, it's one where we keep saying they've picked up all the obvious partners, and that's how they've always done it. Even Bungie, to a degree, makes sense in that they're not necessarily going for the IP, they're going for the talent because they want that talent for their own live service games moving forward, and they're even letting Bungie operate independently, and that's what they wanted. So even that, to a degree, sort of fits with what I assumed how Sony was going to go about doing this once they pick up all their obvious partners. Now, if they do go about picking up a massive publisher where, we've said with Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard, and also Bethesda, they're being put in a very tight spot of like, at some point they might have to do something like that. I don't really want to see them do that, and it would be, uncharacteristic, but I think they might get there eventually, and that's just kind of the weird spot. And perhaps this next one, or at least what they're referring to, could be something like that. And I'm sure we'll have, smaller acquisitions ongoing as well. But, at some point I think we're going to get that big one from Sony. And of course, that's going to be a shocking revelation where a lot of people are going to talk about it. And it's going to be a whole big thing. Maybe that one is soon, but we'll see. Now, going back to PSVR2, if you remember during GDC, there was one panel called Building Next-Gen Games on PSVR2 being presented by Unity developers, and it seems like that talk is finally online, and there's some really interesting details coming out of that. So, namely, the Unity developers actually gave some real-world statistics for the performance improvements when using eye tracking and foveated rendering. So the GPU frame time is 3.6 times faster with both being utilized. And the practical examples being given are things like something as simple as looking at UI elements. They can be magnified both visually and auditorily. Or when you're looking at an object you want to grab, it can be better tracked so it knows what you want to grab instead of, say, grabbing the wrong object and getting frustrated, which that happens all the time in VR. It can also help with things like aim assist, so it knows what you want to shoot, or say you're throwing an object, it can better understand where it is you're trying to aim and actually throw. The tracking can monitor your gaze position, rotation, pupil diameter, and blink states. So in theory, a game might be able to focus on more body language and apply that to the game, like staring or blinking at an NPC. And that possibility alone, I think, sounds really fascinating. And there's so many different ways that can be used. They also mention that it's really important to not go overboard with the haptics as a way to not overwhelm players or at least make them, physically exhausted. The whole point of VR, or at least the number one goal right now for a lot of VR developers and that space, is to make it more comfortable for players. So that's something where they actually caution you don't want to go too crazy with utilizing the haptics. But so far it's sounding really interesting, and it seems like a lot of VR devs are really excited for working on this thing. And so I am excited to see, the release and the price, and I just want more of that proper reveal where here's a lineup of software, and there's no easy way to get an idea of what the experience is like looking at trailers, but just getting a better look at the software lineup and what these devs are working on, that's what I cannot wait to see. Now, moving on, it's been a while since we talked about the Blue Box Game Studios ordeal, if you will, but not much has really happened since the last time, which was a while ago. And recently, they've been deleting tweets that relate to their timelines and what the game is going to be, and now they had to issue a statement saying the game's not canceled. They wanted to put out that preview and the playable teaser that they were scheduled for. They said it was going to be Q1 of this year. Obviously that's come and gone and nothing, so they are just issuing another long-winded statement, which we're not going to spend too much time talking on this. It's just the whole thing has been so weird. I would love to just be at the end of the tunnel and find out what did or did not happen with this developer and this game, and if it will ever see the light of day. It's just everything about it has been so strange. And this is still not really an update. It's still, you know what I mean? So the whole thing has been questionable throughout the entire process. But one thing is clear. It's just, what everyone was initially humoring to begin with, I mean, that's not... No, something else is happening here. And I wish we had answers. Now, moving on, recently the BAFTA Game Awards held a little tournament contest type thing when it came to the best overall controller, which was based on user votes, and very interesting results. The best controller, apparently, is the DualSense, which I'm sure to a degree there's obviously some recency, bias going on there. Although I will say we've had the DualSense for over a year now, and it is something where, it is a really, really good controller. I feel as though over time, once we, are able to have the dust settle, or at least we can look back on it more critically, I think it will actually hold up much better than we think. It might very well be one of the best controllers out there. I honestly love it, but I will put into question the rest of the matchups in this tournament here, where for whatever reason, the DualShock 2 beat out an Elite Series controller, which, I love the DualShock 1 through 3, which is basically the same shell, but I don't know what's going on there. The DualShock 4 is not even in here, and that was a much better improvement. And there's just other weird things going on in here. But yeah, I do think the DualSense over time will hold up very well. Now, one of the bigger stories from yesterday was the confirmation that there is no E3 this year. No in-person event, no digital event, there's no E3. And that's kind of a big deal. It seems like right now the ESA is considering an in-person event in 2023. We'll see if that happens, but right now we've seen for a while that the writing's on the wall. A lot of publishers are doing their own live streams, of course. Console manufacturers also bailed out, or at least Sony and Nintendo, where Sony dipped out. 2018 was their last year, so that was of course a big deal. And now publishers are also going to partner with other live streams. Like right now, it seems like Jeff Keighley's Summer Game Fest might be a lot bigger than what we're initially used to. But yeah, it's one of those end of an era type things for sure. I will definitely miss the most traditional E3 where it was very much, all the manufacturers were there. They held their live streams and their big, boring 2-hour press conferences. And I do really miss that, especially because it was very predictable. Nowadays, it's just so much rumors. What's going to happen? When's this going to get announced? When are we getting a state of play, direct? It's that kind of stuff can get messy. It was at least nice to have the predictability of E3, but the problem is that over time, E3 lost its relevancy when it wasn't really so much a show anymore about trade, because not much trade was actually going on nowadays. Not really coordinating with retail partners as much as 10 something years ago. It used to be something for the manufacturers speaking to investors, and of course deals would happen at E3. I mean, a lot of that stuff kind of went away over time, so that's part of why E3 went away. But I do miss the traditional sense of what E3 used to be and represent. So yeah, that's end of an era for sure. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter, and if you'd like to win a $10 PSN code, it's very easy. You can follow the link down below. Supporting this channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories that I wanted to talk about with you all from this past week, and like we said earlier, the Tuesday video was actually covering the initial announcement of the new PS Plus relaunch. It's nice that that's finally out there. Hopefully we'll get more info soon, so at least we have a better understanding of what's going to be in the service. But now we're looking for PS VR2 stuff and perhaps another big acquisition, which when it happens, we will usually do videos right away on those days, so you can expect that. But that's it. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Badecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.